is actually about 30%, 28%. And that about 72% of the people actually do make it. They are with their spouse that they married. I think it's good for our young people to hear that, because if you say to many of them, look, there's a 50-50 chance you go out that door that somebody's going to shoot you in the face, I'm probably thinking you ain't going out that door. And so a lot of our folks are thinking, I don't want to get married because of look at all the bad stuff that has happened, and so maybe it's not quite as bad as before. A second myth that you may have heard is this, that it is no better if you marry somebody at a Christian school. The divorce rate is no better and no worse than if you married at a state university. That is not true. Matter of fact, the facts indicate that there is somewhere between a 25 and a 50% chance less of you getting a divorce if you meet at a Christian school like some of us did. You know, we met at Christian schools, and I met my wife there, and in 7 days, it'll be 43 years ago that we got married. I remember that day well in New Albany, Mississippi. Her mother had made her wedding dress, had 150 buttons, all of which were hand sewn. My wife's mother could really sew. And so, you know, she came down that aisle. But before she came down that aisle, I was in the back room with my potential father-in-law and my best man. And I was getting a little antsy. It seems like there's only one word I could remember. Forever, forever, forever. And so I was back there thinking, forever? You know, and how long is forever? That's a long time. And I got to admit, a couple of negative thoughts might have come in my mind. You know, and then I walk out, you know, and then I'm standing here at the front, and my best man is here, and her daddy is here saying, you know, well, actually, her brother-in-law was there first, but then her daddy comes down after he brings her in, and I see her at the back, you know, walking in that auditorium, and then all those thoughts about forever were dismissed from my mind. It just didn't matter to me anymore because I saw her. And whenever my father-in-law, my potential father-in-law said, do you take her hand in marriage? I was thinking, oh, yeah. Well, matter of fact, I hope it's a package deal. I don't want just her hand. You know, I'm kind of thinking, you know, I want the whole deal. And so we did. We did that in 1971, June the 11th, New Albany, Mississippi. It was a great day. It was scary, you know, because we didn't know a lot. We didn't have a lot. Our first house, we lived in a preacher's house in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. And we moved in one load of a half-ton pickup truck. That's all stuff we had. Man, you could shoot marbles in some of our bedrooms. We didn't have squat in there. I mean, nothing. What we did have was early attic. You know, I mean, a little bit from here and a little bit from there. None of it matched. And so it was one of those things where you think about that and you think, wow, that was pretty cool, actually, to not, you know, have to worry about a lot of other things and just focus on each other. And so we did. So tonight, let's talk about some of these 4 steps. Number 1, step 1, God-centered families in a godless age. Let's face it, America is becoming more and more secular, and the world is becoming more and more secular. I was in Argentina about the time, within 2 weeks or so, of when the Prime Minister of Argentina approved LGBT marriages. Well, they would just call them gay marriages in Argentina, and they became the first Spanish country in South America to approve gay marriages, because remember, they're about 95% Roman Catholic. And remember, the Pope, at least the Pope at that time, did not favor it. And so, a lot of people in South America are saying, wow, man, our culture is going, you know, south. I mean, you know, we are becoming more and more like the world and less like God. That's what they're thinking in South America. You ask people around this part of the country, do you think our country is going in a positive direction? And a lot of people are saying, nah, it ain't going in a positive direction. Matter of fact, we're getting more and more secular all the time and less spiritual all the time. Well, that means then that you need to fortify your kids. One time I spoke to a group of Christian college presidents and in our schools and the churches of Christ. And so I talked about 3 ideas of Christian education. All right, here they are. Number 1, there's the fortress view. The fortress view is, John Wayne. The Indians are attacking. Let's get in the fort. You get in the fort and then slam that big door shut. And everybody's safe inside the Christian college until the Indians discover arrows with fire. Okay, but everybody is safe inside the fortress, you see. That's one idea of a Christian college. That's not a good idea of Christian education. The second paradigm of Christian education is this. It's the bubble theory. The bubble theory is this. I'm going to put all the students in the school in a big bubble. Well, that's going to work well, isn't it? Yeah, we're going to keep them in the world, but we're going to keep the world away from them. You ever seen that commercial with the dog? You know, they're trying to keep the dog away from fleas, and so he goes around in plastic tubes around the house and in the yard because they want to keep him away from the ticks and fleas and things. Well, that's not going to work well, is it? So the bubble theory doesn't work. So I came up with a third paradigm, and it's called the vaccination theory. The vaccination theory is, look, I cannot protect you from the bad things that will happen to you in your life. And I cannot promise you that only good things will happen just because you went to a Christian school. But I hope that we have boosted your immune system with vaccinations from the Lord so that you can have a strong immune system and you can be in the world without becoming part of the world. That's what I hope for your marriages. I hope for your marriages that the devil will not enter the relationship between you and your spouse, because it is a tough time to live in. All right, so we already talked about Jesus, master of relationships. And here's the Shema, which in Hebrew means to listen. Shema Yisrael. Listen, Israel. Listen to what? The Lord our God, the Lord, He is one. Yahweh, Yahweh is one. Listen, Israel, to this. And how will you tell your children about this? Well, we're not going to tell our children about this because both of us work all the time. Okay, but somebody needs to tell your children about this. I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to hire a good youth minister, and we're going to let him raise our kids for us. And then we'll hire a youth minister for the junior high, and then for the elementary grades, and then for the toddlers, and then we're going to let them take care of raising our kids for us. You will not. I don't care how good your youth ministers are, they will never take place of mom and dad. And so how do you do this? Well, you're supposed to do it. You talk to them about the Lord when they sit at home. Do you talk to your children about the Lord when they sit at home? Do you have any spiritual discussions at all? Let me make it real simple. Do your children see you pray other than at a dinner table? Or even at a dinner table? Do they see you pray? Do you have any spiritual lessons at all with them? It's not realistic to say that you're going to have a family devotional every night. I've never proposed that anybody should do that. But your children should know that you are a believer. And they should see you reading spiritual stuff. And they should see you entertaining spiritual ideas. When? Well, when they sit down. Or whenever, in this case, whenever they're on the dreaded phone. Or the iPad. You know, I got a 3-year-old who can take my grandson, who can take my phone. He could do this from the time that before he was 2. And he could find Angry Birds on my phone. And he can play the game Angry Birds on my phone, and he can't write a stitch. I mean, there's nothing that he can write, but boy, he sure knows how to find something on his phone, and he's pretty good at Temple Run, too. You know, so, and how old is he? Well, he's 3. Has he gone to school yet? No. Is he pretty good at finding stuff on the phone? Yes. Or the iPad? Yes. He can do that. So this generation is technologically advanced. Are they going to be spiritually advanced? Are they going to know what the Bible says? Well, do you talk to them about it when they lie down and when they get up? Do you try to put the Word of God? Some of you know what blinders or symbols are. The idea of keeping a mule focused, because mules sometimes ain't focused. I'm from Middle Tennessee, and Mule Day is a big thing in Columbia, Tennessee, with maybe 200,000 or 300,000 people gathering there once a year for who knows what reason. Mules. Okay, and so they gather there for mules, and mules sometimes need to have the blinders on them to keep them away from the distractions that hurt them. You need to teach a mule how to gee and haw. Does anybody know what that means? Okay, you need to teach a mule how to do that. Go to the left when you want him to go to the left, and go to the right when you want him to go to the right. The problem is, however, with all these distractions, how can you do that with kids these days? All right, so there's a magic formula. I don't care a lot sometimes about Dr. Phil, but I like what he said here. The quality of strength of a relationship is directly proportional to the degree to which each is willing to meet the needs of the other. It's kind of like you married somebody and you never thought about the fact that you're now signing on to meet the needs of this other person. You mean I'm supposed to do something? Oh, yeah. What kind of needs are they? Well, I'm going to make some money. Well, good for you. That's financial needs, but that's a small part of the entire deal. What about her emotional needs? What about her spiritual needs? What about her physical needs? Are you ready to sign on to meet the needs of another person? Well, no, but I'm sure I'm ready to have sex. Well, just because you're ready to have sex doesn't mean that you are ready to meet the needs of somebody else. And therefore, when you look at that, that's what Dr. Phil's talking about. Here are some laws of spiritual growth in the family. Are you ready? By the way, you remember you can have this if you want it in a digital format. You can have this and look at it because I'm going to be going over it quickly. Spiritual growth is intentional. If you want your family to grow spiritually, you got to want to do it, and it's got to be intentional. You cannot accidentally do this. Now, there are some things that you can accidentally do. This is not one of them. You cannot accidentally be a spiritual mentor for your family. You got to decide intentional ways that we are going to try to make this happen at whatever level of development our children happen to be. At whatever level they are. Therefore, it is intentional. It's also intentional for mom and dad. I don't know how you feel about this. I don't want to be controversial. But my wife and I pray audibly together because I do not view that as being in any way against 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 12 through 15. Or especially verse 9, that a woman should adorn herself in modest apparel. Why? Well, because if a woman should adorn herself in modest apparel, does that apply to your bedroom as well? Now let me say that again. If a woman should adorn herself in modest apparel, does that apply to when the two of you are together as husband and wife in your own bedroom? Well, no. Well, then Paul's not talking about that in 1 Timothy 2, 9 through 15. Now, is he? He's talking about in the church. So if you, husbands and wives, want to pray together, then do it. Matter of fact, I would recommend it. Because often, your daughter or your spouse will say something to the Lord that you didn't even know that they were feeling, but they don't mind saying it to God. And there you are learning something about your spouse because you're praying together. But it's not going to happen if you don't pray together. Now, if that offends your own comfort zone, then let the man lead the prayer. But remember, I have reasons for saying to you that 1 Timothy 2, 9 through 15 does not apply to the private settings of husbands and wives. Because remember about the modest apparel stuff. Okay, so what does that mean then? It got to be intentional. Number 2, it's got to be incremental because you can't run until you walk. All right, that means I got to do this by steps. In the same way, if you see a congregation who's at this spot and they need to move to this spot, you better not move overnight, because if you do, you're going to lose members left and right. You're just going to lose them everywhere if you try to move too far too fast. On the other hand, if everything that you do, there's a reason for it, and it's incremental, meaning, okay, sometimes spiritual growth is up and sometimes it's down. Sometimes I'm feeling pretty spiritual, and other times I'm not feeling so spiritual. Some days I feel like I cannot feel closer to the Lord, and other days I struggle. There are a lot of reasons why that is true. That's why spiritual growth is not just like this on a steady continuum. It's more like this. It looks more like a heartbeat on an EKG. In other words, it's up and it's down. It's up and it's down, but generally it's going up. That's spiritual growth. Because none of us are on the hilltop every day of our lives. All right, number 3, spiritual growth is habitual. You have to do it as a habit. If you don't do it as a habit, then it won't be ingrained into something that you regularly do. On Tuesday nights or on Thursday nights or whatever the time is, it needs to be habitual. Number 4, we need to understand that spiritual growth is seasonal. We do grow in spurts, as do other things. Do you remember with some of your kids? Their clothes all fit until one summer. And then one summer, by the end of the summer, none of their clothes fit. Their shoes don't fit. Their pants don't fit. Their shirts or blouses don't fit. Why? That's the summer of growth. There's a growth spurt. They grew 4 inches, it seems like, one summer. Well, is spiritual growth that way? Yes. It definitely is. And therefore, let me ask you a question about this, parents. Do you know the friends, the closest friends of your children? If they are logged on discussing something with somebody on the internet, do you have a pretty good idea of who it might be? Do you know who their friends are at school? Do you know what their favorite colors are? Do you know where they like to eat and where they don't like to eat? Do you know things about them, about how they feel about themselves? I was shocked about the fact that when one of our daughters, who I talked about last night, when she had problems later on when she was a freshman in college, I had no idea that in high school she felt that way about herself. But in the 10th grade, she didn't make it in the cheerleader squad, because that's the year when they start tumbling. And she was not a good tumbler, and a lot of her negative feelings about herself went back to the 10th grade, and then in the 12th grade when my sister died. Number 5, spiritual growth is spiritual. You cannot do this without the Holy Spirit. There's a reason why spiritual has spirit in the middle of it. It is a fruit of the Spirit, the growth that we enjoy. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, meekness, gentleness, etc. And therefore, it is true that we need to talk about the fact that we ask God for help in helping our families to grow as they should. Step 2, commitment in a Facebook age. I got 2,600 friends or something or other on Facebook, and I wouldn't give you a nickel for any of them. Well, maybe some of them are okay. You know, Matt Hupel, I recently made a friend because I'm desperate. Okay, but if maybe I will befriend you, and I have a bunch of friends. I cannot read the entire news feed, because over the years, students and people I know, and they're just there. Are they really my friends? How many of your Facebook friends would you really call on if you needed help? If you really needed help, are they your friends? Well, I think Facebook has a good social media role to play if it is well controlled. But it is not a substitute for real friends. It is not a substitute for real friends. Real friends are face to face, there when I need you, there to support you. You're there to support me. That is a friend. Thicker than a brother. That's a friend. So as we think about these friends, that's one of the things that's difficult in this day and time is commitment. Well, what is the glue? Well, it is commitment. So on the occasion of my mother and daddy's 50th wedding anniversary, they lived, by the way, to be married 59 years, 10 months, and about 20 days. Didn't quite make it 60 years, but they wanted to. I met somebody here is married 60 years. Hold your hand up. Who was that that's married 60 years? Did I see anybody? Okay. Well, anyway, they've been married 60 years. And so when we talk about my mother and father, I said to my dad, I said, Dad, what's the secret of being married for 50 years? My mother's a talker, okay? Dad doesn't talk a lot. So he said, son, here's the secret for being married 50 years. 2 things. Don't die and don't divorce. Okay, well, let me go over that again now. I'm a little slow. I'm from Middle Tennessee. Okay, let me go over that one more time. How is it that you stay married for 50 years? You don't die and you don't divorce. You say to my mother, you know, have you ever been mad at Daddy? Yes, oh yes. Have you ever thought about divorce? I said, no, murder, but not divorce. You know? And so she'd say, now he's the head of the house, but I'm the neck. And I turn the head whichever way I like the head to go. You know, and so she'd just laugh about that. They were really a very special couple. But they were in that generation where people could be married 50 years. And I wonder about this newer generation. How many of them will be married 50 years? And so how do you do it? Commitment is one of those lost traits of modern society, like the Model T. It's nice to talk about, but you seldom see it on the road, Dr. James Hinkle says. The commitment promise is this, and this is just like the commitment promise that you're making to the Lord when you become a Christian. I want you to look at the parallels. Now, when you marry, what are you trying to say? Number one, you are exclusive. That means nobody else. I have been to a couple of weddings where the groom was flirting with the bridal party, and that ain't never a good thing. Okay, whenever the groom is flirting with some of the other girls there, that generally means that you're going to see a divorce within a couple of years. And in both cases where I've seen that, it has happened. In both cases I've seen it, it has happened. Are you ready for an exclusive promise? That means you and you only, so long as we both shall live. Number two, it's unconditional, because most of us cannot fit in the wedding clothes that we got married in. If you allow me to rip out some of the sides of the pants, and maybe part of the sides of the suit that I wore, maybe I can do that. But I can't do that. And frankly, if you can, you tick me off. You know, because skinny people just tick me off. You know, because here's what a skinny person will say to a bigger person like myself, an enlightened person. Okay, here's what they will say. Well, here's how you lose weight. You just eat less and you exercise more. Wow, brilliant. Okay, let's see how you do that now. You eat less and you exercise more. That's usually said by a person John Paul's size, okay, who can eat whatever he wants to and never show it, and you just want to slap his jaws. I mean, you know, because why? Is there anything good about somebody who can do that? Well, some of the rest of us can pass by Krispy Kreme and gain 2 pounds. You know, just by passing by. Well, are you going to love me forever? What does that mean? It is not so funny, but John, you might remember him. He was a student at Freed Hardeman, and when it was found out that he had MS, multiple sclerosis, his wife left him with his 2 kids. Yeah, it's not going to be good. It's going to be degenerative. And he would scare me sometimes because I would ride with him, and he didn't have full control, and he drove a straight shift. He didn't have full control of his legs, but sometimes he would take this left leg and pull it over from the clutch, you know, and over to the brake. And let me tell you, that's when I started to pray better. When I was riding with him, and he was doing this stuff. But I was thinking, did you promise in sickness and in health? And indeed you did. Did you promise in richer and for poorer? And indeed you did. Were there any limitations to what you were promising when you said that? No. Number 3, enduring, which means this is not like renewing a driver's license or renewing a hunting license or a fishing license. This is something that you're into for the long haul. Now you think about that. When you became a Christian, that really is what you were saying to the Lord. Lord, you only, and no other lords will I serve. Lord, number 2, it's unconditional. I do not ever intend to leave you. I do not ever intend not to be a Christian. And Lord, number 3, it will endure. So you see, there are some parallels here besides just marriage. Here's a good start toward developing a good marriage. I've got to hustle because I don't want to keep you forever tonight. But here's a good deal. Even if you've been married for a little while, do you have a mission statement for your marriage? A mission statement for your marriage means, do you know you might go to the Toyota dealership or to the Volkswagen dealership or some other place, and they may have their mission statement somewhere up on the wall. Now, the employees may or may not know what that statement says, but the best businesses have employees who know what that mission statement is, and they have bought into it. They are a part of it. And so I will ask couples before they get married, I want you to get together now. I want to come up with your top 4 or 5 values, what you want out of marriage. And now I want you to tell me how you're going to go about doing that and make a mission statement. I have been known to read their mission statement at their wedding ceremony. Why is this? Because you are intentionally wanting to have the kind of family that God wants you to have. And I want you to put it in some permanent form. I want you to emboss it. I want you to put it in plastic. I want you to put it somewhere in your house. And I want you to read it. So that when the times get tough, you go back and read that mission statement. Okay, I'm going to skip over this because of time, but here's how you go about doing this. But I have far more than I can get to tonight. So counting the costs, all right, so here's the commitment part. And here's what the Lord says. Number 1, the Lord must be first. This will be from Luke chapter 14, verse 26. He's got to be first. He won't accept anything else. Number 2, each person must follow Jesus by accepting his or her own responsibility. Number 3, if we count the cost in other matters, then why should we not do it with regard to Jesus? In other words, if we're building a house and we don't have enough to finish, or if we're about to go to war with somebody who has a lot more soldiers than we do. Number 4, a healthy relationship with Jesus will cost you everything. Like the pearl of great price. It will cost you everything you have. And finally, Christ is the salt of our relationships. Number 3, communication. So the older couple are rocking, been married for many years, on the front porch. And they're both having their own rockers. And so he looks over at her in a tender moment and says, "Honey, I'm proud of you." She says, "Eh?" Says, "Honey, I'm proud of you." She says, "I'm tired of you too." Communication. "I like that dress you're wearing." "Well, why didn't you like the one I wore yesterday?" "I like your hair like that." "Are you saying my hair stunk before this?" Communication. In other words, communing. You see the word there. Happily married husbands and wives differ significantly in the way they communicate. That's a duh moment. We should know that. There's the speaker and the vehicle and the message and the receiver, all of which are reflected in 1 and 2 Corinthians. Paul said he didn't come to them with fancy words because he wanted them to understand. In the same way, when your doctor talks to you, you cannot have informed consent if you don't understand what he's saying. Informed means, have you told me, and have you told me in a way that I can understand? Number 2, if you have not, then I could not possibly have consented because you didn't tell me in a way that I understood. Oh, so I see. So the speaker needs to get it on the level with the audience, and he needs to choose carefully the vehicle that he's going to use to try to communicate, because here's a no-no. Don't try to work this out if you've had an argument in the daytime by sleeping together at night. The person who wrote that song, "Can't We Talk It Over in Bed," is one of the stupidest humans that's ever been on this planet. Because there is no way that that dog is gonna hunt. In other words, a good physical relationship comes from communicating with this person that you love. Sometimes it is with words that are not spoken, but it is always with a loving, tender way. And therefore, here's the cure for a lot of people who are having problems in the area of intimacy, because they're having major problems in the area of communication. This will work probably 80% of the time or better if there are no physical reasons for any sort of sexual dysfunction. This will work most of the time. Therefore, here are some barriers to communication. Number 1, I got my head stuck in things, because things have become people to me, and people have become things. Number 2, I have a critical attitude. And the reason why my spouse doesn't like to talk to me is because I was born in a kickative mood and weaned on a persimmon. That means that I'm always thinking something negative and wanting to say something negative back at you. That t-shirt sometimes represents me. If we didn't have, cynicism in our house, then we wouldn't have any communication at all. If we didn't have sarcasm in our house, we wouldn't have any communication at all. Well, there's a place for humor in your home, but not when it is biting and not when it hurts. And so, don't be so critical. Number 3, don't talk to your spouse when he or she feels that you are trying to work them or manipulate them into your own point of view. That doesn't work. Number 4, being preoccupied. "Honey, I'd like to talk to you." "Okay, what do you want to say?" "Well, no, that means I would like for you to look at me and put your phone down and put your pad down and talk." I challenged some of you Sunday to eat your entire lunch without looking at your phone. And a lot of you told me that you did that. Have you noticed at a restaurant how often you will see either a mother or a father at the table sitting with the rest of their family, and they're on the phone constantly? or they're making business calls, you just need to take that phone and flush it down the toilet. It won't work well in the water. Because it's coming between you and your family, and you're missing teaching opportunities for your children. Number 5, some of us are just dull. That means we don't want to try anything new. We don't want to eat anything new. When we go to a certain place, we want to eat the same thing all the time. We don't want to challenge ourselves in any way, and we're just dull. Can you get out of being dull? I mean, can you get out of your comfort zone some and say, you know, I think I need to try that. All right, number 6, dishonesty. When you lie to your spouse, that's just like a terminal disease for communication. And when you continually do it, it encourages him or her not to want to talk to you. So, 7 surprising secrets that couples know. I'm going to have to stop after this. It's easy to fall in love, but to stay happy is a challenge. You can fall in love with a lot of people. And one of the guys that ticks me off is eHarmony.com. I know his name might be Dr. Neil Clark Warren or whatever it is, but he is not giving you sound theory when he's telling you that there's one person that God has designed for you. If that was true, she'd probably speak Chinese. I mean, is there just one person out there in 7.1 billion that you've got to find in order to be happy? That is foolishness. There's a lot of people that you can be happy with, but it is a choice. Number 2, a good we starts with a good me. Remember what I said about the vertical relationship? If I'm good with God, then I will be better as a spouse. Number 3, you do sweat the small stuff. Know what that means? Well, when my wife is, when she doesn't have sores in her throat because of treatment or whatever, it means Dairy Queen milkshake. Or it means something else that's special to her. It means going by and getting her some bling. She likes to wear bling. It's not all real. But it is nonetheless bling, and she likes to wear it. Do you understand the small things about your spouse? Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to take my spouse on a trip around the world. Well, why don't you take her to a movie first? Why don't you take her to her favorite place to eat if you know what that is? Why don't you do that first? Because the small things in marriage are very, very important. Number 4, it's okay to fight. You're going to disagree. Sometimes I disagree with myself. It is okay to disagree, but you need to understand that generally speaking, you have to talk about things. First of all, no hitting. You have to talk about things that have happened in the last 30 or 60 days. And if it's older than that, remember 1 Corinthians chapter 13, that love does not keep a record of wrongdoing. And if you're bringing up stuff from 10 years ago, you're keeping a record of wrongdoing. So keep it to the last 30 days or 60 days, 90 days max. And then try to resolve this before nighttime. Number 5, keep expectations in check because you didn't marry the perfect spouse. Sometimes they use your toothbrush on your honeymoon. You didn't marry the perfect spouse. Sometimes they leave clothes lying on the floor. I know one woman that got so tired of her husband leaving his pants on the bed, you know, when he was gotten in the shower and stuff. So by the way, she was 60 years old when she was telling me this. So what she did is while he was in the shower, she just sewed his pants to the bedspread. And therefore, when it came time to pick his pants up, he pulled the whole bedspread off. Now, you know what he did and learned from that? You got 2 legs. You can put them in a dirty clothes, and you can help. It's possible to do that. In my mother's generation, remember the shaking the sweet tea glass when it was empty, shaking the ice cubes? What does that mean? Woman, bring that iced tea in here. A lot of women would do that. How many of you can remember your mamas or your grandmamas doing that for your granddaddies? Okay, shaking that tea glass, and here they'd come. Now, you shake a tea glass to this new generation of girls, and they're going to say, are your legs broke? And they're going to say, would you like me to pump some air in your lungs too? You know, what exactly else do you want me to do for you? In other words, it is possible that men can do stuff around the home. And then, number 6, nothing compares to the love that you have in the family. And don't be sure that you know your partner, because you may think that you know them and you don't know them if you have an opportunity to get to know them. But the best thing you can do is condemning me right now. And that is to be present when they need you. It's been a little harder every night to drive to Florence, not because they don't love you. It's just because I've been one of those people who've said, I will cancel a gospel meeting if my wife needs me. Now, she told me tonight, she said, you go and you have a good time at the restaurant and you tell the people that I'm thinking about them and that kind of stuff. But I still understand that one of the things that your family does not need to say about you is that in critical moments of their lives, you were not there. You chose a ball game over going to your daughter's recital. You chose going fishing rather than being to some event that was important for your son, maybe a play. Because in some of the most important times, you were not there. That song, Cats in the Cradle, is special to me, and I've loved it for a long time. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't want my children to be able to say that about me. You know how the lyrics go about, when my child was born, I was busy. And I'd like to be with my son, and I couldn't be there. And then finally, a child goes to college, and he's learned from me that I'm not going to be there, so he's not going to be there for me. And so now it's hard to see my grandchildren because I treated my children that way. The Cat's in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, the Little Boy Blue and the Man in the Moon. When you coming home, Dad? I don't know when. But we'll get together then, son. You know we'll have a good time then. I don't have time tonight, men. But if I did, I'd like to spend some considerable time saying to the men that one of the problems with our families is that we don't have men who are stepping up to the plate to be spiritual leaders in their families. If I had time, I'd tell you that. You probably already know it. Our government cannot pour enough money into fixing our families to make it work. Nor can self-help groups do that as well. But I would like to say to the men that if you're going to get married, you make sure that you understand now that you're putting the needs of this other person even before your own. And so, are you ready to become a Christian tonight? Are you ready to make that exclusive promise to Jesus? Are you ready to say, you and no other? Through faith, repentance, confession, and baptism, the Lord adds you to His church. One of the most important things that we can do sometimes is to say to our children, and I've done this, I'm sorry that I was not at blank. I'm sorry that I could not do this, that I was not there. And I've tried, especially in the last 15 years, I've really tried to make sure that when it comes time for our grandkids to do something, soccer, t-ball, whatever it is, to try to be there as much as I can, because those kids will remember whether or not they looked over and saw you or they didn't see you. So tonight, if you need to come to the Lord, would you come so? Come now as we stand and sing.